Hi team, and welcome back to the Knowable World Anchor Fact series introducing the history of India. We are learning about a country that will become one of the most important cultures in the world you live in. It's a country that is trying to create a new identity for itself and its huge population, which, as we learned in the last lesson, is a difficult thing for India to do. That's because India is a post-colonial culture, which means it is a culture that used to be a colony inside of someone else's empire. And in order to be what it wants to be, it has to stand up for itself and say what it is that it wants to be all on its own, the same way America once did. As we learned in the last lesson, however, that is a difficult task. As ancient as India is, it has no clear history of its own. For thousands of years, there were people in India living in Hindu culture with a certain set of religious beliefs. We talked about that in the last lesson. Hindu culture is based on poetry, literature, and religion, but not history. There's an important vocabulary word we can use to describe this lack of history in Indian culture. We can say that Hindu culture was ahistorical. Words that begin with certain letters often have a special meaning. For instance, words that begin with mon or mono involve one of something. Monarchy means a government with one ruler, such as a king. Monotheism means a religion with only one god. Words that begin with a or an involve none of something. Anarchy and atheism are good examples. We can see that these words are built the same way. You have archy, the rule of someone, or theism, the belief in a god, and then the prefix, the addition to the beginning of the word, which tells you how the meaning is to be changed. Mon or mono meaning one, a or an meaning none. When we say India was an ahistorical culture, we mean it had no history. So how do we know what happened? Up to a certain point, we simply do not know. But then another culture arrived to throw some light on the story. That culture was ancient Greece, and its leader at the time was Alexander the Great. We've seen him before in our Anchor Fact series. Alexander conquered Egypt. He was a Greek pharaoh. Alexander was the ruler of Greece. And as the leader of the Greeks, he wanted to lead them to revenge against the Persian Empire that attacked them in the most important war in history, the Greco-Persian War. If you want to know why I think the Greco-Persian War is the single most important war in all of history, you can learn the answer in our Anchor Fact series on ancient Greece. So Alexander conquered the entire Persian Empire all the way to India. But he wasn't satisfied. Alexander wanted to rule the world. So he invaded India in 327 BC. We know this because the Greeks had invented history. They didn't just record it, they studied it. Everything they did was written down and studied. Alexander invaded India and defeated a ruler named Porus at the Battle of the Hydaspes in 326 BC. But then something strange happened. Alexander's own commanders rebelled against him. They refused to continue. They were already so far from home. They did not want to continue this quest of his to conquer the world. So Alexander returned to Babylon, the famous ancient city with the hanging gardens, and then mysteriously died. So obviously Alexander didn't have much time to change India. He just made a big splash and then went away. That makes for a pretty strange anchor fact. Anchor facts, as we learn them at Knowable World, are not just about events that changed the past, however. They are the best way to organize the past in our minds. If we want to organize Indian history in our minds, it's simple. Before circa 327 BC, we don't know anything. Only after 327 BC do we really start to learn. So that's definitely an anchor fact. What happens is that the story of India starts to become knowable. That's something we need if we're going to know history at all. So we can be thankful for Alexander the Great. Unfortunately, because the Greeks did not stay in India, there were not many important outcomes to his invasion. There were changes in Indian art. Some of the new art in India is beautiful in a new way, showing a Greek influence. But the history of India does not change. What we see is that India continues to have another problem. That problem is anarchy. So we have an ahistorical culture that is an anarchy. No history and no government. Do you think that's a coincidence? We do see the rise and fall in India for a brief time of an empire called the Maurya Empire. It was the first empire, historically speaking, that was built by Indians. But something strange happened to it. Its ruler, Ashoka, was a Buddhist, not a Hindu. He was a follower of the teachings of a man named Siddhartha Gautama, who lived in the dark period before Alexander the Great, and who became known as the Buddha. Ashoka believed that according to Buddhism, the things he had to do to build and maintain his empire, such as fight wars, were simply wrong, and he no longer wanted to do them. Many people would admire Ashoka for this belief, but there's a problem. A ruler who will not fight wars cannot build a nation. There is no example in history of anybody building a nation without fighting wars. Not a single one. Not surprisingly, therefore, the Maurya Empire did not last. India became an anarchy again. It broke apart and was never put back together until invaders did it. We'll see who those first invaders were in the next lesson.